Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Freer. I'm a professor of music in the School of Music at Georgia State University, where my focus is on music education. And today, I'd like to share with you a project that I was engaged with a faculty colleague at Northwest University in South Africa. Our project was entitled Writing Across Cultures, Creating Graduate Peer Support. And it was sponsored by our two universities, in particular, our Office of International Initiatives. The Office of International Initiatives at Georgia State first contacted me through the coordinator of the virtual exchange program, Dr. Nanette Commander. I received an email from her in the summer of 2019 indicating that a partner university, Northwest University in South Africa, was looking for faculty to collaborate with its own faculty on projects that would embrace our different cultures, our different locales, and technology. And I said, hey, that sounds like something I'd be interested in. Tell me more. And while I was waiting to hear more, I did some research and found out that Yanelise Vandemera Morelli, she has since been married, is now a professor at Northwest University in music education. And I knew of her as a graduate student at NYU, where she studied with some of the most famous music education theorists and philosophers that we have. And so I knew of her, but I wanted to explore a little bit more. So I read up on her, looked at her website, and that led us to figure out how might we exchange our ideas virtually. And so first of all, let me explain what a virtual exchange is and what it looks like in our context here in university settings. At core, or at its most simplest form, a virtual exchange can be partner teams at two universities that are separated by some geographic distance or cultural difference or something like that. I took a series of webinar training sessions with the Office of International Initiatives here at Georgia State University, and want to share with you the definition of virtual exchange as a starting point for our conversation today. At core, a virtual exchange uses the internet and innovative online pedagogies to foster meaningful exchanges between teachers and students with their peers in geographically distant locations and from different lingua-cultural backgrounds. These can range from short shared discussions to a full-on taught course or project. And whether that project is short-term or long-term, the goal is that the exchange of cultures, backgrounds, languages, and experiences enhances the learning for our students and also for ourselves. So I contacted Yanelise and we engaged in several email conversations that led to a site visit in September 2019. Yanelise and her colleagues from Northwest University were here for a week. On Monday and Tuesday, we engaged in a series of workshops, planning and brainstorming sessions where we thought about how we might develop a project that would fall under the auspices of a virtual exchange. On Wednesday and Thursday, we took advantage of Yanelise's expertise, where she led some guest lectures for our students in music education, and she also led a rehearsal for our choral union, our largest choral ensemble here at Georgia State, because the ensemble was coincidentally learning a piece of South African music. So that was a kind of a perfect marriage of coincidences there. And then on Friday, we presented our project descriptions. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about our project as we move forward. We wanted to retain our existing curriculum and projects. We decided that we didn't have time and we didn't have the desire for a virtual exchange to be a completely different activity than what we were normally doing. We both operate in governmental and legal kinds of settings where we need to provide specific courses with specific assessments so that students can be certified as teachers or move forward in the certification process. So we couldn't disrupt that. We wanted, therefore, the virtual exchange activities to be seamlessly integrated into our existing curriculum and projects. We identified some shared problems, and we then came upon an interesting moment when we realized that we'd be focusing on graduate-aged students, whereas we thought initially that we'd be focused with undergraduates. Our conversations led us to our older students. At Northwest University, these are still students at the undergraduate level, even though they are the same age as the students we have in our master's program. So we'll use the graduate aged terminology. Both sets of students lacked confidence in writing. They both lacked constructive critiquing skills, not the desire to critique in a constructive way, but the tools to know how to do it, and narrow views of music education. And that's true both for our students here at Georgia State, where they work in a school district in a particular county or district in a particular state, but they might not know much about music education beyond the state of Georgia. The same was true for the locales in South Africa, made very much more relevant because there are multiple languages spoken in South Africa as the official languages. And the students that we engaged with from Northwest University spoke all of those languages. There were constraints, therefore, of language, of time zone, which was between 6 and 7 hours, depending on the time of year, and constraints for technology. And so we worked through all of those issues, and those became problems or challenges to overcome through the course of our project. We decided to focus on the final projects that existed for both courses. So it was a one course, students in one course at Georgia State, students in another course at Northwest. At Georgia State, the final project was to submit a manuscript to a journal related to research that would make its way into our master's students' cumulative paper. That's a paper they develop over 2 years, hopefully not 4, 2 years in all of their different courses. And one element of that is how to write in an academic setting, and therefore the journal manuscript fits that bill. At Northwest, the students in that course explore an issue in music ed and then write a paper about it as that issue pertains to different cultures or different countries. So that fit perfectly with our goals of the international virtual exchange. We decided that the project would culminate in the submission of manuscripts to the South African Music Teacher Journal, and that these manuscripts would be co-authored by teams of Georgia State and Northwest students, coached by the 2 faculty members. So as faculty members, we needed to make some decisions. We needed to coordinate our syllabi and our schedules so that we can include both synchronous and asynchronous sessions in a co-teaching model, so that we were teaching each other's students as well as maintaining focus on our own curriculum that needed to follow. We did schedule, although most of the work was done asynchronously and via email and that sort of thing, we decided to host a synchronous session, which was tough to schedule given the time zone difference, at 5:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in April 2020. That provided no end of consternation from our students, but hey, we did it. We had to decide how we would divide the editing and the coaching responsibilities for the course and for the project. We had to explore the technology available to us, what would work at both universities, what wouldn't, and we had to assign the writing teams, which ended up being kind of a problem for us because we didn't know each other's students. So we let the students eventually work toward assigning the writing teams to themselves based on their shared interests. That worked out really well, actually. The students then, if that was the goal, had to identify the topics, the modes of communication they would use, what the content would be, and how they would go through the process of writing, researching their topics, and then writing about them. All of this having to take place across time zones, across hemispheres, across cultures, across languages. An additional element was that we wanted to do a research project that would have life beyond the academic project we were engaged with. So Yanalise and I had approved, and by our IRB, we had several elements that we would have in our project, meaning including the manuscript drafts and their final versions. We would have field notes taken by the instructors, as well as reflections written by the students and contributed verbally. We would have student end of course evaluations, the various chat logs that the students would develop through the course of the project, and then pre and post test scores on the intercultural effectiveness scale. I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we move forward. Along the way, we received a grant to present the results of this project at the European Association for Music in Schools on June 10th to 13th, 2020 in Padova, Italy. So at this point, you're probably saying, all right, so June 2020 in Northern Italy, and you're right, COVID-19 interfered with this project in a mighty way. And yet the project continued. We had to make some changes. First of all, obviously, the conference was canceled. The Northwest students were impacted by the loss of university-sponsored technology, rolling blackouts, and forced isolation in their hometowns. The lockdowns in South Africa were far more severe than here, and the technology access in South Africa, or at least that part of South Africa, is much less ubiquitous than it is here. And so when you couple that with government-imposed rolling blackouts, the lack of internet and computers that most of these students had in their home situations, it was difficult. The students decided to communicate via WhatsApp. Luckily, we had thought ahead of time to get everyone's phone number and contact information on WhatsApp. So that was the one vehicle of communication that remained, provided that the students in South Africa had access to cell phone service, which was not always the case. So sometimes they had to travel and they had to make appointments for when they were going to talk to our Georgia State students so that they could have that communication continue. Also, the Northwest students could not take the intercultural effectiveness survey for all of these reasons, and so that was taken by just the Georgia State students. The key element here is they persisted. So proud of the students for working through what was an arduous set of challenges. They all struggled during the pandemic, and we looked at a series of resources, including this article in the Chronicle, which was how to salvage a disastrous day in your COVID-19 quarantine. So the course and the project became as much about how do you move forward, how do you deal with adversity, how do you change, adapt, and become resilient. And that was important for our students as well as for the students at Northwest University. And as I'll share in a moment, we uncovered that not all of our students did as well as the others. There were some outcomes that were quite positive. The Georgia State University students did complete the Intercultural Effectiveness Survey. All 6 manuscripts were completed, and we decided to make GSU students the lead authors simply because they had better access to technology. So the support came from the Northwest University students. Our students were the lead authors. The research project is being co-written with me and Yanalise, and then we are presenting this hopefully at some sort of international conference, although we were able to present it at a South African educational research conference in September. We'd still like to have something beyond either of our 2 countries. Now, more about this intercultural effectiveness scale, because this is interesting. The scale focuses on key areas that influence whether we are likely to get along with people whose cultural or demographic background differs from ours. There are multiple questions on the survey, but they clump into 3 areas. 1, continuous learning, which is how we learn about other people and the accuracy of that learning. Number 2, interpersonal engagement, how we develop and manage relationships with people who are different than us. And then this 3rd one, hardiness, which became really relevant this semester. How we manage the challenges and stress involved in interacting with people representing cultural and demographic differences. Yes, that's the doorbell. Yes, that's my dog. And yes, this is Zoom. but yet we persist. So anyway, the intercultural effectiveness scale, you can see the scores that our students from Georgia State generated on the pre-test and the post-test. And in general, the scores increased, showing that the project had a positive effect on our intercultural effectiveness. However, you'll notice that in the area of hardiness, those scores although they did rise, the rate of increase was not as much as in the other areas. So let's look at that. The scores for hardiness were clearly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, that's how we manage challenge and stress involved in interacting with people representing cultural and demographic differences. While most of the scores increased, 2 of the GSU students reported lower hardiness ratings at the conclusion of the project than before it began. So in other words, their scores actually decreased after COVID-19. Now, looking more closely, these 2 students both had particularly difficult times communicating with their writing partners due to the problems with technology that I discussed earlier. And they were the only GSU students who lived alone during the pandemic. So we might have some evidence, however snapshotty it might be, that the COVID-19 affected students in such a way that they needed to have some sort of peer and familial support at home in order to continue feeling success and to lower the levels of stress. And of course, we know that the challenge of the logistics of this particular project were problematic for these 2 students. So hardiness scores for these students were particularly interesting. At the end of the day, the end of the semester, we've had 3 of the manuscripts accepted for publication in the South African Music Teacher Journal. Chanel Bailey looked at church music and its relationship to music classrooms, Chanel being the lead author. Lead author Emily Grooms looked at issues of autism spectrum disorder in South African classrooms. Anvu Tran, his group focused on diversity, looking at how 3 music educators related culturally responsive pedagogy. And then 3 manuscripts are under review for publication in the Georgia Music News Journal. And these are led by authors Zane Franco, Megan Gibson, and Aaron Moore, looking at beginning teacher experiences, general music in Johannesburg and Atlanta, and constructivism and improvisation in South African music. And so with that, I say thank you. Yanalise and I, though we represent different hemispheres, different countries, we're separated by a big pond of water, we share so much in common. And I am so grateful that Georgia State was able to make this opportunity possible to us. And I look forward to where it will lead. So I am going to stop my screen share and thank you again for joining us.